The early symptoms were probably the exact same thing as other myositis patients. I had difficulty getting up out of a chair, and I attributed that to the fact that I had just been sitting behind a desk for 40 years, and decided that I need to get up and exercise. And then it just became constant. And I said, there's something going on. And I took a fall, thought it was just my own clumsiness. But when I fell, it was on a sidewalk, and I had a pedestrian that was there that was gracious enough to help me up. And I realized, thank God he was there, because I couldn't have gotten up on my own. And as time progressed, so did the symptoms. And I realized that I had more and more difficulty going up and down stairs, getting up out of a chair, getting up out of any seated position. And I approached my doctor, and unfortunately, this was not a very pleasant experience. I had a doctor who, like so many of us have experienced, the doctor was absolutely unfamiliar with inclusion body myositis. So I got the obligatory pat on the head, and he told me I was getting older. And I said, no, there's something else going on. And it became almost confrontational with the doctor, to the point where, we had an enzyme test on the muscle enzymes, the CK test, CPK, and they came back elevated. And his response was, I've seen higher. And it was absolutely, it wasn't an issue to him. I pressed him for a matter of 3 months, to the point where, he finally said, oh, well, he said, if you want to get another test, we can do that. And I said, what do you think I was, screaming for? So my experience with that was very unpleasant and unfortunate. And, but I began to do my own research, because I knew something was wrong with my body. And I started looking into some things and going online and reading as much as I can. And the end result was that I had done some, what they refer to as differential diagnosis. I know that the symptoms that I had lined up with some of the things that I saw online. And one of the symptoms was you cannot stand on your heels. I was in my late 60s then. How often does one stand on their heels? I did that when I was 8 or 9. And but sure enough, it wasn't going to happen. So through the course of that research, I had decided upon my own that I had inclusion body myositis. So I eventually went for an EMG through a neurologist, and the EMG was looking at the monitor that she was using, and looked very puzzled. And I could tell by the expression on her face, something was wrong. And I questioned her, and I said, did you find something? And she just shook her head. She goes, this is very rare, was her comment. And I asked then, I said, are you looking for inclusion body myositis? And she gasped and actually drew back, and she said, oh my, she said, you've done your reading. And I said, yes, I have. I said, is that what you're looking for? And she indeed said, yes, that's what we're looking for. And that resulted in a biopsy, which proved the diagnosis was indeed IBM. And so in a nutshell, I diagnosed myself. You feel lost. You feel out there. You have no one to turn to. And it was a very distressing realization that I went to my family doctor. I went to another doctor. They had not even heard of this. And so I had found that to be one of the biggest challenges, was educating the medical community on myositis and the challenges that accompany it. You know, and it's something where the symptoms then, you know, progressed where I began to fall more frequently, and I started using a cane, which has progressed into using a rollator, which I use 100% of the time. I bought a scooter that allows me to go more, you know, longer distances, and that has been a godsend. I took my first vacation by air this past August, and made arrangements with the airline that they allowed me to put the scooter right down the jetway. I got on the plane, and they moved the scooter into baggage immediately. And when the plane landed, the scooter was right there for me. So those airport you know, concourses, as you are aware, are quite long, and there's no way I could have made it without that scooter. But you know, as you progress through this disease, there's you know you have to accept what you have. It's not being a pessimist. It's not being an optimist. It's being a realist. And it's just that this is what it is, and I'll make the best of it. It sometimes is very upsetting, sometimes very aggravating. But I look at it from a standpoint of I consider myself fortunate in that this journey that I have gone through has allowed me to look at more and more research to the causes of inclusion body myositis. And with the research that has been done by scientists throughout the country, I have started putting together things that, and I've learned that inclusion body myositis is very, very closely related to ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. And it is really quite, one could consider it a flip of the coin as to where that disease ends up, whether it is in your motor neuron cells in the brain or if it's in the skeletal muscle cells in the legs. I look at it from a standpoint of, man, am I lucky to get this in my legs, or else we would not be having this conversation. So I look at it, I try to look at it continually on the bright side, and look at the positive side of things. It is a challenge by any measure. I know that I am going to be dependent upon a wheelchair in the not too distant future. It's one of those things where you just, if I could cross my fingers, I would, but with the myositis, you can't do that anymore. And it's a challenge that we all have to just stand up and face, accept, and we'll make the very best of it. The support system was upon my diagnosis, and when I got the biopsy back, I had no idea where to turn. And the closest thing that I could come up with was the Muscular Dystrophy Association. So I called them, explained to them that I was just diagnosed, and they in turn directed me toward the Myositis Association. And upon calling the Myositis Association, I was put in touch with the local support group in the Chicago area where I lived at that time, to one of the individuals that ran it, Bill Simmerall, and I called Bill, and we met, and I became very involved with that support group, and remain so today. Even though I moved out of the Chicago area, I live now in Western Colorado, and there's no local support group. But that said, the support group from the TMA and the local support groups were absolutely fantastic. It was a source of information, of sharing of stories that we could all relate to. We helped each other, learned more about it, and so the support from that aspect was absolutely phenomenal. I could not have asked for a better support group than what I have found in TMA and the local support groups. That's a great question. To get into myositis, and again, I have spent many years in doing my own research on this thing. I have found it somewhat fascinating, but I have an ulterior motive, and that is, being a veteran, I had been exposed to Agent Orange when I served in the service in Southeast Asia. I was there for 3 years. And of course, you always wonder about, whether or not that was the cause. So I've done a lot of research, and I've learned an enormous amount of information about what the causes are. What I would hope that other people understand is that without getting into all of the clinical and molecular and the diagnostic aspects of it, which become very esoteric and specialized and scientific, and thank God for dictionaries, because I had, every time I read something, I had to have these things right next to me. But I think the one thing that I would hope that people would understand about the disease is that it's relativity to ALS, and the understanding that there are just certain things that I can't do anymore, and that it's difficult for me to get out of a chair or go to a restaurant and get up from a table, without struggling. But that can be applied to many other diseases as well. So the rarity of this disease, I think, is the challenge that we face. And I believe that if I could pinpoint one thing, it would be to educate the medical community far greater than what they know now. I have found doctors that have only heard of myositis and have never treated a patient with it. But the majority of doctors that I have talked to have not even heard of myositis. So it is something that I would hope that they would be able to learn more, and I try to do that on every occasion that warrants it. To extend that comment that I made about I've done a lot of research, one of the research papers that I came upon came out of from a Dr. Todd Cohen out of the University of North Carolina. And Dr. Cohen runs a lab that has focused on the therapeutics for treating the protein that causes the myositis, which is TDP43, which what happens is the TDP43, for those who may not be familiar with it, is that it resides in the nucleus of the muscle cells, and that's where it works great. What happens is there's an interaction with other proteins that cause that TDP43 protein to move out of the nucleus and into the surrounding outside part of the cell called the cytoplasm. And that is where it clumps up, if you will, and what they call aggregates. And what Dr. Cohen is researching right now is a therapeutic approach to this thing. In other words, they're going to try to develop medicine that will reverse that. And if they can be successful, that is going to be monumental. And I've actually talked to Dr. Cohen, and I am very, very excited about the conversation that we had and the direction that they're going in. And it could help both ALS and IBM patients with that. If they could get that protein to find a way to prevent it from clumping up in the muscle cells and in the motor neuron cells, I mean, that would be massively welcomed. It would be a phenomenal breakthrough.